I believe in getting up early. 5 o'clock's my time. I look after the animals, take the dog for a walk, come home, breakfast, a regular day, unless I have a meeting, which comes up quite often, or an appointment. But I lead a good life. I'm lucky.
Before COVID, it was up early, breakfast, heading to work, working with students, having a great time, going out to co-op placements, doing monitoring, helping them get placements, working through problems, ensuring that they had the best experience ever, helping them gain life experience and life skills, and helping them move on into careers or career directions.
Well, before COVID, I was still working full-time for the London Chamber of Commerce. I was creating all their special networking events. I was going after new memberships, sponsorships. It was a very, very busy life. Not a 9-to-5 life in any way, but it was busy and fun.
Very busy, very busy. I spent a great deal of time here at Horton Street Seniors. Played cards, got in the pool, did exercise programs, sat around, had coffee with my friends, joked, laughed, and generally had a great time.
Life was good. Life is good, but before the pandemic, I had just retired. So I had worked for 40 years for my last employer. It was an opportunity for me to travel, do some things that I enjoyed doing, do some volunteer work. Life was very busy.
It's fun. I'm very active. Like, I have lots of friends, and we do lots, my husband and my family. It was just, there was lots going on all the time, you know, and COVID definitely changed that. So prior to COVID, yeah, go, go, go.
I would go to my job, which was at a veterinary clinic, and, you know, I was a receptionist there, and just deal with, first of all, the phone calls and emails that come in.
It was a little bit of a shock, and in the beginning, I'll be honest with you, I was not sure this was real. It was sort of like, really, is this happening? I know that in the January, we started hearing rumblings about COVID, but I think I was really kind of unsure of what was happening till, you know, when people were making runs to the store for toilet paper, and I was like, okay, I guess this is happening.
Well, I heard about COVID on the news when they said we had our first case. And I thought, oh, because other places in the world were already encountering cases and had to isolate small groups of people. So I told my wife and kids, we need to start wearing masks and doing those necessary things to try to stay outside the COVID zone. And they thought I was crazy. And then bit by bit, it started moving through society, and then it started into the lockdown phase. I have friends who from Asia, and they actually were the first people to encounter the lockdowns. And they said, it is really not fun. This is really significant. And I have friends up at the university who said the same thing, that this isn't just a passing thing. It's not like the cold, it's completely different.
I was in the food court at White Oaks Mall because, as I say, I'm just 10 minutes walk from there. And all of a sudden they were coming around saying, oh, we're closing this down. And I said, oh, well, I guess I'll take my coffee outside. Oh, you've got time to finish your coffee, but then you have to leave. And that's when everything was shut down.
I am the chair of the advisory committee here at Horton Street Seniors. We were in a meeting, and it was brought up that it looked like there was going to be a serious health issue, and they were waiting for guidance from the Middlesex County Health Unit. And before I reached home that day, they closed the club.
At first, I just thought, okay, it'll be a couple of weeks, and so that'll be fine, because I'm the type of person that I like to be organized and have something to do. And all of a sudden, there was nothing. I was at home 24/7. We couldn't go out. So it was lonely, isolated. I got in a desperation point of even making a list of what I wanted to do that day and checking it off so that I would be organized to have actually something to do.
From what I initially heard, it sounded like it hopefully was going to be something short term, but it was something very serious, a lot more than the ones we had with SARS and others before that.
I had heard rumblings about it, and I was doing one of my networking events on the day of March 16th. I remember it well. And people started, well, a lot of people had registered, but they weren't showing up. And I was hearing these rumblings about people were afraid of coming where there were crowds, and so they decided to stay away. Did a little bit more investigating and started to feel uncomfortable myself being in a crowd.
I shouldn't use the term buy into lockdown, but I perhaps didn't take it as seriously as other people. I continued to meet people. I'd get coffee and drive to Springbank Park and meet a couple of guys for coffee.
Well, stuck at home. I live right near the White Oaks Mall, so over at Walmart, and because I'm so close, that's where I get my groceries. So I would go in there from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. That was supposed to be seniors' time. The rest of the time was at home, and that was pretty somewhat stressful.
It just changed everything, and I was alone and basically staring at four walls pretty well every day.
You know, it was frightening in so many ways. We thought, okay, maybe a few months and life will get back to normal. And we all know now that that never happened.
I found it challenging because I had to start working at home immediately before the government shut down the province. My workplace shut the workplace down and sent everyone home with their laptops. My husband had to stay at home and work, and all my children, they had to stay in their homes and work, and we couldn't see each other.
From the side, sidetracked eyes open wide. You say it's been there.
Things were going to change quite a lot at the clinic, and things had already started to change, and it was already pretty stressful. So once COVID hit, I decided, even though I had planned to work a couple more years, I retired.
I didn't understand it, of course, but I was scared because there was not a lot of information, and I didn't know exactly how you could catch it, and I was nervous about dying, to be quite honest. I started making calls to funeral homes and getting information. I started tweaking my will. I mean, this is in several days following, but it made me start thinking that way, which is not me.
I personally have serious health issues, and I found it terrifying. I knew it had to be shut down. There wasn't any situation where the center could remain open in any way, shape, or form because it was far too dangerous. We have a large number of members who are, the autoimmune system isn't so wonderful, so you can't take a chance on their health by keeping open a club.
I studied history, ancient history and this and that. So I was fully aware of the 1918 pandemic they had. And we all expected, at least the people I talked to, that it would be one of those things, you know, okay, we get it, it's going to be gone. And so a lot of people are going to get it, but it's not going to be worldwide, because in those days they didn't know. But it isn't. It stayed a lot longer, and there's been a lot more to it. And that scares a lot of people.
We immediately closed the chamber's offices. Everybody took their computers and everything else, and we went and worked from home. My type of job, I couldn't work from home. My job dealt with person-to-person contact. My whole life changed, actually. You know, I'd get up every day at the normal time, sit down at my computer at my dining room table, which in itself was weird. And now what do? I mean, I had a phone, but it didn't ring. The first 6 months I was lost.
It was like constantly changing all the time. And then you also had to figure out how other people around you were dealing with the situation. You know, at first it's like, okay, I'm just gonna stay home and not barely do anything or go almost anywhere, you know, for the first bit. And then it's like, all right, well, now we have to start figuring out how we're going to handle stuff, like how are you going to get your groceries, how are you going to like deal with your family and whatnot. So yeah, I did some talking with family members, and we all decided to just stay away from each other for a while.
We really didn't know what this was, and it's better to be safe than sorry. You know, like, I mean, even a lot of people complained about it, but still we lost 60,000 people, Canadians only, with COVID. So as far as I was concerned, it was immediate lockdown, and I was okay with that. You know, I don't want to lose anyone I love. I got lucky. I didn't lose anyone I loved.
Yeah, it was actually scary. And a lot of times when you went out, you took a look around and there were no other cars on the road. You had to keep checking the rules to see if I was allowed to be out at that time. You wanted to make sure you weren't breaching anything. You wanted to make sure you still got your groceries and all your supplies and did it in an expeditious manner. You had to make sure you wore your mask and, you know, did everything necessary to keep yourself from getting COVID, because we didn't know what the end game was. At the time, the mortality rate was pretty high because they didn't have the treatment protocols in place. So when people got sick, they really got sick.
All of those things suddenly changed. Like, you really thought about, should I go out? Government didn't want you driving.
And I also had things, you've got things that are booked. Like, I mean, you know, I had concerts I was going to go to. Like, I mean, well, we're refunding your tickets. You're not going there.
Yep.
So things like that.
Vacations.
Yeah, vacations as well. Ours was, we had a cruise and it was postponed for 2 years.
Well, you didn't go to your doctor, for one thing. So we got used to phoning the doctor and seeing what, you know, rather than running to the door and saying, I'm here, I've got a pain somewhere. You had to phone that doctor and see what happened there. And then if you did go to see the doctor, because it was necessary, all the precautions had to be taken, the mask, the hands washed, don't go in until you're called.
It's funny, as a senior, I've often wondered, you know, what's going to happen the day that I won't be able to drive anymore. And COVID, I think, was a wake-up call in a sense, because there are so many things that you weren't able to or allowed to do that you would normally do.
I felt very sorry for all the businesses in the City of London. I live downtown. I've always worked downtown, and I've embraced their downtown, and it was always a hub of activity at the restaurants, the bars, the hotels, the cafes, the bistros, the Budweiser Gardens, the London Music Hall. There was always a hub of activity, and I thought, how can this happen? Like, how can this happen to all these people and the businesses?
If it had been left to everybody, I mean, I'd have been just as bad. I'd have thought, well, is it as bad as they say? I'm going out, you know. And I would have done it. I know, knowing myself, I would. But it was brought home to us, yes, it's serious. Yes, you can get it, not just your neighbor. Yes, you can die.
I couldn't go to the grocery stores, and if I did, like, I had family that went for me. They didn't want me to go to the stores. But I did the odd time, but I think I only went out once a month when the pandemic was on. The big challenge was, you know, fuel and groceries. They trying to make sure that we had everything we needed at the time, and supplies, trying to get masks, trying to get gloves. That was a significant challenge because at the time, nobody had tooled up or geared up to provide them. Toilet paper was another thing. People were selling it out of the back of cars. It was crazy. I'd never seen anything like it. I kept thinking, those hoarders, these guys, you know, trying to make money on the backs of poor people who are just trying to get through.
I have a relative, a cousin that's in a nursing home. I had to get tested. Your name had to be on a list before you could even go in. And a lot of times you couldn't go because they were shut down because of COVID. I did have a cousin that passed. And again, with COVID, there was no real closure to it. So you never, you know, really got to say your final goodbyes and talk to other people about the memories and the good things that that person did.
And all of a sudden, I'm not seeing or talking anyone. My friends and I, we were also a very social group. We started Zooming once a week at 5 o'clock with a martini in hand because we didn't want to lose contact, but we were all afraid to go out of our houses. I started ordering groceries online and having them dropped at my door, and I hated that because I hated someone else picking my fruits and vegetables. I hated everything, and it took a big adjustment on so many levels.
I cooked a lot more. I don't know if it's because of COVID or because I was stuck at home. I know how to make soup now.
I could do that. I could do that. For me, I was quilting. And so now I've gone into more elaborate quilts, and I have bins of completed quilts now, quilted items. So I did that, and I made a lot more soup.
I wrote some stories about my life growing up and all that type of stuff, and my days of my hockey days and my wrestling days and my days being a jock.
Here at the center, we made a point of calling each other. And various members, even of the transit staff, would call, how you doing? Is there anything you need? Can we help you in any way? It made a lot of difference.
I do a lot of reading, a lot of crossword puzzles, and I also paint.
I started going for walks every day. I started going for walks instead of coming to the Boys and Girls Club. I personally would go for a walk every day, and I would try and do some nature walks just to make you feel better, like, you know, maybe go by Gibbons Park or, you know, the Thames, some of the natural areas in the city.
There was different things on YouTube that we could watch as well or do. Church members, we have our church on the YouTube on a Sunday, so we were able to do that.
I learned to play guitar a different way. I learned some new repair techniques. I built all kinds of really cool projects around the house. My daughter was a kindergarten teacher, and she ended up raising some chicks, so I ended up building a chicken coop. So we had some chickens for a time, getting fresh eggs, but the kindergarten kids online could watch the little chicks grow up and become chickens and eventually start laying eggs. It was pretty cool.
We started to learn how to deal with the pandemic. Some close friends would come to my home, and we would wear masks. We would sanitize our hands. We got a brand new deck of cards, and we played cribbage once a week. And it was just, it really helped all of us because we were used to playing cards quite often, and we were used to the social activity, the social interaction.
I think it does affect your mental health to a certain extent because of the boredom and isolation and just being isolated. As important as diet is, as important as exercise is, the most important is the social aspect, being able to talk to other people and bounce ideas off them, and that I missed.
My mental state was really not as up and happy as I usually was because it was just so hard to stay in and stuff like that, that your mental state was affected quite a bit.
I lost 3 friends in the pandemic. None of them to COVID, but you know, I was a couple of them I was real close because they were good buddies, and not having them around to talk to, and I couldn't go and see them obviously during the pandemic. But the thing is that, you know, didn't have them in my life anymore, and that really hurt. You know, I'm a social person. I like to be around people and doing things with people, and not having that, you know, made a big difference.
I run some of the programs. I used to run some of the programs here, like particularly darts. Well, when we started to get better, I phoned every dart player, and we had a lot of darts. I ran 3 a week. So many of them, oh, well, I don't want to go out. I don't want to come back. I've been in the house for 2 years, and we don't feel the energy. Let's face it, we all aged more than the 2 years. We aged because we weren't out to do what we wanted.
It's a known fact that people need people. And a lot of seniors that I personally know felt really, really isolated and didn't know the process to fix that. I mean, I joined, I learned how to play cards online. So I started playing bridge once a week with my group of friends online. I found out about these university courses you could take online, not for any kind of accreditation, but just for interest's sake. I started taking a lot of music courses because that's my passion. And I kept myself very busy. I had to keep my mental health challenged. I had to keep learning more. But I know a lot of seniors that did not happen. They sat home, they didn't talk to anyone, they watched TV, and they ate. All very unhealthy ways of living your life, especially when you're a senior.
I found it sad in the seniors' homes, and they were basically in the for-profit ones, the way seniors were treated. Like they were making discoveries when they had the Army and the RCMP going into these nursing homes to help out the appalling conditions, and that they were the ones that suffered most from COVID. I mean, and the fact that their family couldn't visit them. So some of these seniors who were dying, there was nobody there for them.
Older people were represented as incredibly frail, and sometimes they were expendable. I felt that with a lot of the elder care homes. When they didn't provide adequate care, they didn't have enough staff to work with them, they didn't have the resources to meet their needs, and it spread through and a lot of them died. There was a large percentage compared to the general population that got sick and died. And it seemed to be, well, that's just one of the costs of doing business with the elderly. After all the years they've worked hard, paid taxes, and generated revenue for the society and helped set up a good society, that they got pushed to the side.
I worried about people in long-term care and them not being able to see people, not having visitors and being alone. That was pretty scary, and it certainly, it's given me a whole different perspective on aging, and I'm hoping that people will be taking care of me when I'm older.
When my daughter, who lives in a group home, being totally confined, is the word to use, and they weren't allowed to go out or anything. Talking to her, she was much more depressed than she ever was, you know, and that hurt me too, very much so.
My mother was in long-term care at the time, and I wasn't allowed to go see her, and she passed away during COVID when the restrictions were still in place. And so that was really difficult. And she didn't pass away from COVID, but not being able to see her.
Be with her.
And be with her, and
Hard.
our whole family found that extremely challenging.
Yeah.
I think there was more fear in the seniors, and the younger people, they've got a much more carefree attitude, a lot of them.
I think many people were frightened by the prospect of COVID, especially at the point in time when there were a lot of deaths. And I think the older ones, I think, tended not to panic as much, whereas younger people, and maybe rightly so, took it more seriously. You know, they were worried about their kids, their families, and whereas older people, I guess, had more life experiences.
I think a lot of young people were seriously impacted. I know young members of my family were very seriously impacted. Seniors were impacted because of what I have said earlier, the loneliness, the fact that we couldn't go out and do things, but a lot of them don't anyway.
I have a 23-year-old and a 30-year-old, and they had the same vision as what we had. You know, like, I mean, if the vaccination's there, we're going to get it. We were lucky in that sense. You know, if it means health, since they were little, you know, if there's vaccinations and you need to get it, you're going to get it, whether you like it or not. And if it's going to keep you alive and healthy, so be it.
I really felt for parents that had to work at home, and if they had, I kept thinking of parents that might have 2 or 3 children in school, perhaps, and they're also working at home. And I can't imagine, I felt like I was very lucky that I was retired. Yes, I did have older children at home that were working, but I didn't have to care for them in that sense. They were old enough to take care of themselves. So I really, really felt like, for me, my hats went off to all these young mothers and fathers and kids that were learning at home.
It really was a fear thing. I was very thankful that my children had grown, because I don't know if I could have handled the little ones, you know, trying to keep them protected.
I think it affected my grandchildren. The girl's 11, she adapted very well, but the boy is like 7, and I think it's been 2 lost years for him.
I think it had a real effect on school kids, especially in the younger grades. They weren't getting the socialization that they needed. Some of these kids don't have the social skills.
Students and young people at home, COVID wasn't the only problem. Their parents were also at home dealing with COVID.
They portrayed, in my opinion, seniors as the most vulnerable and the ones that were going to die. That if you caught this, you weren't going to survive it. This is pre-vaccination and masking and all that. But even once that came into place, they seemed to focus a lot that the seniors, and I mean, seniors can be such a wide age span, but I think they scared us the most because it sounded like if we were going to get it, we weren't going to survive.
The isolation. I'm a person that loves being active. I like being out just about every day, and to be stuck at home, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. I felt my mind going to mush.
My children came home, so I always had, I have 4 kids, and so I had people around me. So in that sense, I felt that I was pretty lucky. I wasn't alone, but I did feel for people that I heard that were alone or couldn't visit family members, and I could understand that it could be a very lonely time.
If you're used to having someone over or going somewhere every week, whether you're hosting and fixing dinner or drinks or going to the movies together and maybe for snacks afterwards, that just went out the door.
And I think by the time I had one of my girlfriends who figured out how we can meet, by then, well, things were starting to open up. We just didn't quite figure it out. She said, I will show up in my car with my own coffee. You open the door, I walk through your house, we'll go sit out back. And she sat like this the whole time holding her coffee. So she didn't touch anything. And by then, it's like things were opening up. I said, geez, I wish I'd thought of that or heard of this a lot sooner. We could have still, met, even though, so.
Yeah. We tried that with the kids, but it didn't work so
yeah.
well with the grandkids because then they wanted to come out of the car to be with us.
hug,
So we did that. We only tried that once, and it was a disaster, so we didn't do it again.
Yes, it did. It was very long, it was lonely. I mean, I like my home and everything, and I don't mind being by myself, but that was a little bit too long, and it was like climbing the wall sometimes. It was just basically so quiet and so still that I didn't have much to do at all. I think that was the worst thing for me. And because I still was able to talk on the phone, and they still had some things on Zoom and things through the club here. So we had that, but the loneliness of being 24/7 in one place. And it's like the first thing in the morning, and at nighttime, it seemed like it was a very long day.
The isolation is the killer, because it wasn't a choice, it was a necessity.
I actually have a cousin in Montreal who was so afraid of everything. She had the financial means to do whatever, not that what I did needed financial means. She didn't leave her house for over a year. She didn't open her windows. She was so afraid. She was a person who was otherwise, I always thought, quite intelligent, but something snapped. And she was so frightened that life stopped completely for her. And she's only now starting to venture out a little bit It's taken a toll on her, and I don't believe she'll ever be the woman she was before. And I don't think she's alone. I think the media scared a lot of people. And if you didn't do your own investigation and research and weed out the garbage to the science and the reality, I think you were scared to live in any way. And that will have a lasting effect, in my opinion.
When you have mass communication, it's complicated. It's complicated. And if anything, I think it's with social media and everything, it's becoming even more complicated.
When I was young, we relied on newspapers and radio and TV, of course, but we didn't, well, you know, if you think of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth, we had to wait until a jet plane flew the film of the coronation here before we actually could see it on TV. Today, it's just like that, instantaneous.
One of the things I really didn't like was all the disinformation online. And that disinformation had a lot of students and others going down rabbit holes, trying to find the horrible thing at the bottom of the pit. And lo and behold, it was the misinformation. That was the horrible thing at the bottom of the pit.
God,
I think I would have shut down social media, TikTok, that kind of stuff.
Really? I like TikTok.
I do too, but I'm thinking of the misinformation from the misinformation
But it
aspect
wasn't.
of it.
But it just wasn't TikTok. There was
Yeah, it's
misinformation
all over.
everywhere. It was all over the place.
Yeah, I think there'd be maybe more restrictions on that. I just worry about, you know, the silliness like that we heard in the States where people, drink bleach or drink whatever. I mean, and you do have some responsibilities as an individual, but I think when someone does that, those
Freedom
things
of
should be shut
speech,
down.
though, I think it's up to the individual, right, to figure it out on their own. And some can and some can't. And
I
if you want
just feel sorry for those that can't.
to, I know.
Those are, yeah. We can't protect ourselves from ourselves. I guess that's what it comes down to.
I had to look at spending less time looking at dark things on the internet, you know, all the bad news, all the conspiracy theories, all the other stuff, because I find that the more time you spend on that stuff, the more time you've wasted, the less time you've invested in people, and the darker you feel about yourself and about society as a whole.
Well, the vaccines being administered didn't automatically lift restrictions. That took a while. And the vaccines, I mean, we grew up with vaccines, much more than you did in a way, because I remember when some vaccines were invented. Example, polio. Whooping cough was another one that was invented while I was young. Believe me, I'm old. So I was hopeful that the vaccines would be able to, if not stop the pandemic, at least slow it down. Because the number of people that we reported sick and dying was horrible, especially with the impetus on the long-term care.
The most difficult was when it was dealing with some family members that were anti-vaccine. Yeah. So that was tricky because, well, let's just say sometimes it was better not to discuss it.
COVID was real. Like a couple of weeks ago, I had someone come up to me and say, we were talking about COVID, and she said, so what do you think? Do you think it was real? And I said, well, yeah, just speak to some of my family members that had to deal with patients and families of those that had COVID that weren't going to make it.
There's still people not talking to other people because of the way they interpret information, and it's pretty bad.
We began to look at, okay, this person hasn't had a vaccination. Now, is he right or wrong? Should I be not having one, or should I have one? And should we force them to have it? Is he putting our lives in danger because he's not having one? And that was a very big thing that is worried a lot of people, not just seniors.
I think the government did the best they could. I was a firm believer. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I firmly believe in, as the shots were being administered, I would take those shots. And, but it was stressful having my life so constricted.
It kept changing, which is normal because I don't think the government or doctors really knew everything. It evolved over time, and as we received more information, then we changed how we did things.
I was very happy with the vaccinations. I had all 4, and as far as I was concerned, it's science. They developed it very quickly, and I was okay with it.
When the vaccine started, I think I did 67 appointments where I helped people get their appointments and make sure they got to their appointments to get their vaccines. I believe that we're put here to help each other.
In a way, it was like the dawning of a new era. It was like springtime. You could go out, you could see people, you could hear chatter. I think it was uplifting, and I think a lot of people basically looked forward to the lifting of restrictions, and then when they came, I think there was a greater sense of freedom for everybody. You see less and less people wearing masks, for example, but there are many who still insist on wearing masks, and that's probably a good thing. It's a personal choice, but different people react differently to the circumstances.
As the things have been lifted away, there's still a fear behind a lot of people's minds. I have a friend that hasn't gone out since COVID started, or even now. She's nervous that she might meet somebody that hasn't done what they're supposed to and get COVID.
I'm still wearing a mask. I'm very careful about wearing a mask. And there are many people here at the club who wear their masks. When we have our card games, we wear masks.
We have been to one movie since COVID lifted. We used to go to movies all the time. I've been to restaurants maybe 4 times since COVID lifted, and we used to go regularly.
With everybody getting around and doing things, it feels a lot more normal, but you still got to be very careful, and particularly in large groups, you just don't know. You don't know who's affected, and that's the biggest problem with this whole thing is that people were getting affected and they don't know how.
Personally, I don't think that there will ever be the norm the way it was before. I think we're always going to be vulnerable, especially if you're over 55. The other night I was coming home down Richmond Street and I saw these kids lined up for St. Patrick's Day, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I hope nobody gets COVID or gets anything. So in the back of my mind, I'm always very mindful of what could happen.
Working from home for 2 years and not doing my real job made me, I just kept leaving more. I don't know the words I'm looking for, but all of a sudden the chamber was no longer my main focus, and I had to find other things, which I did. And so when slowly things started going back to normal and people went back to the office, I thought to myself, no, I'm done. It helped me make the decision to retire.
Things had to get back to normal for all kinds of reasons, economic reasons for the country and for people's well-being. Since things opened up, at least now I feel more like a human being. And before I wasn't.
You know, it really changed everybody to the point that they really valued what we had. And with it being such a long time, you really noticed that when you got together, the feelings between the people were so intense, and it was so good to see them, and that it was just an amazing feeling when you got to see them.
Years ago, a microbiologist telling me that it's not cancer, it's not an illness per se, but it's a virus that eventually is going to get us.
We learned to chip in and help each other out. It gave me a better understanding of people and where they're coming from. It made me more flexible in the way I looked at situations, Because before I would look at things one way, and now I would have to put myself in the mindset of somebody else who was struggling and figure out a different way to perceive that, because I didn't want to judge.
I hope people have learned to be kinder to one another. Take the opportunities when possible to reach out and help.
I realized how much I did help people, because even where I live, it's a place called Participation House, and we are classed as volunteers, and we usually have dinners and things like that, and movie nights, where that was all stopped, and we couldn't help them at all. So yes, I felt it was very hard not to be able to do that and help the people there at the house.
Well, definitely, I hope nothing like this happens again, you know, because I do have children of my own and grandchildren, and I hope they don't ever have to go through this ever again.
I think people need to talk about it. I think seniors need to come together and talk about what it was like and what they should do now to make life more normal, and join organizations like this.
Every day I look outside, the colors in your eyes reflect the light that guides my way. And every night I wish that I could rearrange the stars up in your sky to write my name. Just know that you're my breathing life, and that's a fact, it's never changing, no. Know that I'm just skipping stones, trying to fly across the ocean.